Good morning, everyone. I am giving you a video lecture today. I'm going to divide it up into two, hopefully 15-minute tranches. I did actually try it the other day and spent too long waffling on and produced a 30-minute video, which I then wasn't able to upload anywhere. Lesson learned from that, and so hopefully we'll get through two talks, just maybe 12 to 15 minutes each, and I do have another 10-minute video to upload, but that video actually only makes sense in the context of this material I'm going to introduce today. So what I'm going to do is upload them all to YouTube and then provide you all with the links, so you're able to watch them all at your leisure. Now, the reason I'm giving a couple of video talks, I think I mentioned on the audio last week, is that it's sometimes quite hard to get through all the material when you're delivering them in that particular way. And of course, academics, myself included, got a tendency to just keep talking and talking. We're quite loquacious people, and with no reference to the time. So obviously, that's something we have to sort of factor in when we're using this kind of media. I want to just be mindful of that, and of course, it's the type of media whereby you guys are listening. It's not like in the class where you might get broken up a bit by a conversation that we might have. So that in a way also almost incentivizes me to continue talking, and then we end up running out of time and not covering everything in the class. But I think the actual video talks are a good way of supplementing the material we're doing through the virtual classroom. What I hope to do is just give sort of potted talks on particular topics, just to flesh out what we already have in the course notes and the PowerPoints and the like. So hopefully 12, 15 minutes each. Now, we left off talking about public choice theory, and we were kind of discussing theories of government, I feel like, and you know, how whether government's a benevolent force, what it actually does in the economy, what its core responsibilities are, what its core competencies are, and we did refer quite closely to public choice theory as a theory which is quite cynical, I guess, quite hard-bitten theory, looking at politicians and civil servants acting on the basis of self-interest rather than the public interest, and that is contrary to, of course, a lot of the theory which went before, which saw government as a benevolent force which was going to act as a kind of neutral arbiter in the public interest. Public choice theory says no, there's no divergence between how individuals act as individuals within the private sector economy, or in their individual or collective capacity, than there is working in the political system. It's not as if they just flip a switch and become something completely different because of the particular job they're doing. So that is a nice way of kind of leading into the representative system of representative democracy, as it clearly highlights many of the problems of that system. I think when we look at bureaucracy and lobbying, we will of course have the knowledge of this kind of analysis in place as to how the system actually operates, and look at how it's kind of operated by these different groups. You can see how the public choice theory fits in, and how it aligns with some of the practices within the political system. Okay, so we want to touch on representative democracy as a system, and these little talks will be mainly about our role as individuals, our relationship with that system, rather than the lobbyists, the special interests. Well, I'll touch on that in another talk. So, of course, we live under a representative democracy in Canada. We elect politicians to sit in the federal parliament, also in provincial parliaments. We have what's called the first past the post system at the right level of ridings. In Britain, we call them constituencies, but it's the same. It's the same kind of thing. It just means the electors organised into a particular area by geography, by demographics. And so the main sort of framework of the system has been sort of inherited, I guess, from Canada's status as a colony of Great Britain. It's taken many of the trappings of the British Constitution and just applied them here. But there are important differences, of course. Probably the most important difference being that Canada, of course, operates a federal system of government. In other words, we have different provinces and different territories with clearly defined powers. They have their own parliamentary system. They have devolved powers from the federal government. The federal government itself has fairly clearly defined powers. But the relationship, of course, between the provinces and the federal government is not always a happy one, because, of course, political differences might come into play. You might have a conservative federal government, but a liberal provincial government, and they might clash over the direction of policy. We've seen this, of course, in recent years, where we've got the situation at the moment, actually, between the federal government, of course, of Justin Trudeau, and in Ontario we've got a Conservative government of Doug Ford. So clearly there's a recipe for disaster, if you like, or not necessarily, but there's a recipe for conflict. You might say it's a good thing to have different ideas at different levels of government. It perhaps encourages cooperation, conciliation, all of these kind of things. So, in large measure, the Canadian system is inherited from Britain, and the framework of that system is based on British parliamentary democracy. We have elections every 5 years. More commonly, they're every 4 years. The government has the luxury of choosing the time of the election, so it can choose a favourable time when it thinks it might best win the election. This is a good advantage to have, of course. And the elections themselves, of course, a reminder, I guess, a great exercise in democracy, that we, the electors, that's you and I, are the masters of the political system. We are the ones who vote people in and vote people out. Now, it might not be much of a responsibility or much in the way of authority to put your X in a box every 4-5 years, but I would suggest that the political system allows you to participate in many different ways throughout the duration of parliaments. It's not just the case that your political role begins and ends by voting. There are many other means by which you can participate within the political system. So in that sense, it's an open system. In a sense, it allows you to participate within your local area. You can join a political party. You can donate in an individual capacity. We'll come on to that in another talk, when I talk about the influence of corporate and individuals' interests on political parties. But you can petition the Parliament. You can become part of an advocacy group. You can become part of a pressure group. You might belong to a professional association which is lobbying Parliament. There are many other means by which you exercise your political status. So, frequent changes of government, elections every 4 or 5 years, that's a good thing. That imposes a bit of a discipline, I guess, on politicians. So we have an electoral cycle, just as we have a business cycle, of course, where we have the inevitable ups and downs of the economy. We're going through a fairly down time at the moment and for the foreseeable future, but the electoral cycle is a bit more predictable in a sense that we have the elections every 4 or 5 years. Of course, that means that there can be a certain amount of planning involved, especially by the government, which is in power, it can choose to release funds to particular groups, to particular individuals. It can choose to give tax breaks. It can choose to sort of contribute in meaningful ways to things which are potential vote winners on things like promising greater expenditure on education, health, welfare. These are always things which are vote winners. So the government's in a fortunate position in that respect. Now, the connection, of course, with business and with corporate entities is fairly obvious. Although we've technically got a system of one person, one vote, which is often taken to mean the sort of universal application of democracy, that we're all equal, we all have an individual vote. There are great problems with this in many ways, seeing this as somehow overriding everything else which happens within the system. We'll come on to the imbalance in the electoral system in the next short talk, but clearly it's not as simple as that. So I think I'll just end this section now, and we'll start another little talk for the sake of uploading things in a timely manner. So I shall stop here and come back in a moment.